Lisa, good. We have a great crew here. We've got a lot to get through. So let me call this meeting to order and ask Kayla to take the roll, please.
Trustee Riley.
Here.
Trustee Eames.
Here.
Trustee Kane.
Yes, here.
Trustee Flood.
Here.
Trustee McMahon.
Here.
Trustee Cates.
Here.
Don't see Kelly. Trustee Michoud.
Here.
Sorry. And Trustee Alexander.
Hello.
And we have a quorum. I'm just checking my roster. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you all for making time so soon after the meeting. But we have some important work before us. I want to take about 45 minutes to talk about the strategic plan. Then we need to go into executive session for a little bit of business. I think we can do this. Emily and I had a great chat to get ready. And as you know, the job today is to try to look at the strategic plan, think about our oversight responsibilities, and assign committees to take the lead on various charges. And I want to welcome the chancellor and the vice chancellors and the presidents who are here. This is obviously a collaborative work and a pretty critical one at that. So we want to make sure that we do this right. Before I turn it to Emily, I think the plan is really very comprehensive, and we're very well aware, especially after our meeting, that a good deal of what it lays out has already begun. And the progress is encouraging and very positive and great to see. Our job is oversight. A lot that's in this strategic plan is, I would characterize as operational. And I think we need to be quite sensitive to what's the appropriate role for the board and what's the appropriate role for the chancellor and his team and the universities as we think through who does what. And keep in mind, our job is oversight. Emily and I agree that this is not intended to create any new meetings. That's our commitment to do this work within our current work plans. I think the task before us is to figure out how we integrate the work of oversight of these great goals into the current work plan of the committees, and to use them as benchmarks to weigh proposals. So not only do we want to make sure we keep on top of the progress through our work, but also think about when we get a proposal before us, is it consistent with the strategic plan and those areas that your committee is responsible for? But again, we want to do that in a way that minimizes the demands on the staff and on the universities and on all of us, so that it's integrated into our work in a seamless kind of way. Emily and I had a chat about one of the initiatives in the plan. Some of these don't obviously fit nicely into a committee. One is the R&D initiative. And, we have several options. We could start a new committee. We could, there's all kinds of things we could do, but I think that then stretches people too thin, creates more meetings. And I think at our last board meeting, we were really clear that what we want to do is have more engaging board meetings, as we did in Presque Isle, with a lot of give and take and Q&A. So I would suggest, and we can talk more to Vice Chancellor Farini Mundy, I would suggest that, given that she does an R&D report to the board, that we restructure that and make it the sort of oversight meeting around the R&D initiatives, and have it as a presentation and a conversation with the board about where we're headed in R&D. And Emily and I thought that was a good idea, and I'm pleased to see Joan nodding affirmatively. So I think we can find a way to do that as a full board and not have to worry about new committees or new ways to do oversight. And we have to recognize that it's a 5-year plan. Everything doesn't have to be done in the next minute and a half, even though all of us would like that. But with that, let me just, Emily, I think we just go through this fairly quickly, but.
Yeah, let me just do a couple of things since we're in a public session for people who are maybe watching at home. And so there's some context. What we have before us is a draft that is reflective of a conversation that was had by Jeff St. John, Carolyn, and myself, where we went through the strategic plan with it, keeping in mind the existing jurisdictions of board committees, their existing work plans, their existing things they are responsible for. And it's important to say out loud that the strategic plan is really no longer a separate thing we're doing, right? We heard this at the meeting in Presque Isle. It is now something that is integrated and in the process of being integrated across everything that we're doing. When the committee meets again in a few weeks, we're going to be talking about the work of the campuses, right? This is now taking on a life of its own, and it's exciting at so many levels. So to Trish's point, the role of the committees is accountability, oversight, to ask questions, right? There's not a lot of there's like not a lot of entirely new stuff. It's stuff that goes inside work that already exists, that has to do with academic programs or has implications for budgets or implications for HR policies. So Carolyn and Jeff and I went through the strategic plan, and with that idea, and the only mistake is there's a typo, it was the 17th of October, not the 7th, that we went through and put in what we believed was the committee of jurisdiction based on current committee responsibilities that would take the lead on tracking these items, right? And providing that oversight and accountability. Where we inserted the strategic planning committee as primarily, including in the draft includes this for research, is where there's something that's sort of a cross-system, multi-campus sort of new way of thinking about things. Those items we kept with the strategic planning committee itself. That is what you have before you. And Trish, I'll just see if Jeff or Carolyn wants to add any additional context. But that's the posture with which we bring this draft for you today.
Thanks, Emily. Jeff or Carolyn?
I think that's a perfect summary. Thank you.
Okay. Carolyn's nodding. Okay, let me just, my thought is to go through each commitment, just make sure if people have questions, some of them may be more clear than others, but are
Just
there
do you
any?
want me to talk them through as we kind of went through it, not one at a time, but by commitment? Do you want me to do that?
Exactly. Yep, but let me first ask if there are general, any general concerns, comments, questions from the board. Trustee Alexander.
Thank you very much. And this is a very helpful way to start this discussion. And I overall agree with the proposal that Trish made about having research and R&D handled the way she described. That makes a lot of sense to me. I was trying to grapple my own self about what an appropriate way would be to more integrate those into the current committee structure, but I don't think it works really to do it that way. So this proposal makes sense to me. I did think I was a little concerned at a high level about assigning specific areas to the strategic planning committee that, in my opinion, our committee should be the focal point for every board meeting, trying to put together the status of the overall plan, commitments, goals, objectives, and kind of wrapping it all together so that we understood where we were and what was on the table and what the committees are involved in developing. And I really had a problem with assigning substantive issues to the strategic plan committee as such. And I thought maybe some of those could just be left to the system office to report on as needed to either the board or the strategic plan committee. So I just thought the committee has to be a place where we sort of get a feel for how it's all coming together. And some of the big picture goals and developments that the committees report on and that the system office would gather and present to us at our SP meetings. So that was my only real comment on the overall division up here. Thanks.
Can I ask a clarifying question to that, Trish? Because I think it's a really well taken point, Barbara. Thank you. Because I think what you just said at the end about the system reporting back, what we were envisioning is the system reporting back just to the strategic planning committee about those initiatives that are across thing. It's not the committee doing anything other than having a home for those report outs. So maybe we're saying the same thing. That's what I want to make sure, because I think, and I would say that's generally true for all of the committee assignments for the most part, that they are things that as they percolate, most of them will not be a standalone presentation even. It will be a mention in a proposal about a new program or a review of a program. This comes under action item X goal Y, rather than something standalone. So I think as we operationalize what oversight looks like, I actually think what you said reflects what I think our intention was in assigning things to strategic planning. It was to give it a home for the report out.
Because
that's helpful.
your thinking is their initiatives that don't fall logically in any particular.
They don't have elements of them may, right? If a new academic program comes out of it, or if a new budget item comes out of it, but that the idea that tracking that those conversations we've asked for are happening, right? That's where the intention lies in that oversight. So yeah, I think what Barbara, what you said to me is I think what we were trying to accomplish. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Trustee McMahon, and if others have thoughts on this, please weigh in. Trustee McMahon?
The goals that we have, and a lot of them assigned to ASA, which is what I'm thinking about, is there any way they can be prioritized in ASA ought to be reviewing these in the next 90 days, ASA ought to be reviewing this in the next year, so that we get a feel for how this should be incorporated into the work plan? Right now, it's very difficult for me to read this 13-page list and say, that's number one, that's the one we should be picking up. And I'm wondering if the strategic planning group has done any work around that could give us a little bit of guidance.
I would say we have, and I'm actually looking at Jeff because I think Jeff is probably the right partner for that conversation and thinking about the integration of these items with the work plan. But Jeff, I don't want to speak for you.
David, absolutely. So Carolyn and Emily and I did have that conversation when we met. We wanted to have this meeting to gauge the board's sense of the basic approach, and then with the board's support for the approach as outlined by Emily and Trish on this call already, we would then reconvene and begin to do just what you described. So for ASA, what is the sequence and cycle of reports based on what's due when in the timelines? FFT doing the same thing with Ryan, Carolyn doing the same thing with HRLR. And so we can lay it out for trustees in relation to the committees, and David, to your point, in relation to their respective work plans.
Okay, David, clear? Trustee Cates?
Thank you. Those are both two great points. So maybe on the first one, the draft oversight plan can make it clear what Barbara and Emily were saying. So then we pick this up, or someone else picks it up in 6 months, they'll see that that's how it's going to work. I just want to say overall that just as for FFT and other committee members may have different perspectives, but I was really comfortable with the items which you tentatively have assigned to FFT as one member. And I didn't see anything in reading through the other ones that I thought, geez, those really should be assigned to FFT. So from one person's perspective, I think you nailed it on FFT.
Thank you.
Trustee Landry?
Thank you. Couldn't find my chat hand, my yellow hand. It's my own hand. So in looking at these, this is a question for Jeff or Carolyn or Chancellor or Emily. So just as an example, looking at commitment 1 as a very broad statement that the University of Maine is going to do these things. Under success actions, it says UMS and its universities and law school will be transparent and key student success indicators. Then it lists 3 goals and actions. So am I right to assume that the committees really don't need to track these activities? That's really for you all, that these are the actions that you have determined are going to lead somewhere, but we're interested in where they're leading to, right? And many of these things already have, you already have data on lots of these things. You know how many people you keep, you know how many people come, you know how many people go, how much money gets invested in research, lots of data already. So we have a baseline in a number of these areas. And it would seem to me that the goal would be for the committees to be tracking to what end do we want to survey students? To what end do we want to do any of these things? And if that's increase enrollment, increase retention, increase online, increase faculty satisfaction, increase whatever the thing is, those are the indicators, those are the KPIs that we are interested in, and we can start to track those to the extent that baseline information already exists. We don't need to wait to set goals, right? Because we can know where those baselines are now, and then we can watch them over the life of this plan if it's a 5-year plan. So I just want to clarify that all of these individual actions and strategies, we're going to survey this group, we're going to hold a meeting here, we're going to have a symposium on X. Those are not things that we need to track. Those are things that you may want to track because you're interested in these activities. What we want to track are the KPIs that those things support, so that in the end, we know, are we being successful in the most important aspects that are going to assist in supporting this university going forward? And I don't know if that's Jeff or who wants to respond to that.
I'm happy to respond, but anyone.
Carolyn?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. We agree. It's the KPIs and the metrics that we choose that we'll be reporting on. We will keep that other information because clearly we're going to have to talk about how we got there and what we used as our basis. We're trying to track the KPIs and the progress that we hopefully make on these. But yes, you're correct.
So you'll be coming up with those KPIs because they're not in here now necessarily. You know, we don't. And so you'll be plucking those out, maybe suggesting those to the committees. And then also that helps us to know whether or not some of these actions or strategies are worth keeping, right? Some of them may not work. And so we want to be able to switch early if we find that our numbers are going the wrong way or are just plateaued. So it gives us a chance to change it up. It's a long time, 5 years, things will change in that time period. So you will suggest to us the KPIs that you think are most important for us to be looking at. And it won't wait necessarily to setting a goal for the KPI because we already have data on some of these things. Okay, that's great.
But I do think it's very collaborative that we would suggest what we think would get the information, those KPIs, but people on the committee might have, they may say, well, what about this? And then we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I think
Thank you.
a great value added and a great way for each committee to begin the work is to get at the KPIs so that we stay at the trees and not in the.
I think that's right. And the other thing I would add is I think, and Barbara and Ray know this especially well, as Jeff does too, that as a reminder, again, because we're in public session, the document itself is a reflection of a lot of input and a lot of work, particularly from faculty and staff and some students. And so there are some items that are a little more specific and the good news is that the system and the presidents they know what those things are and that they're going to be doing them. But I think they are what you said is correct, Valerie, about how we'll be tracking them and articulating them. And I think the piece you said that I also want to emphasize is that you're right. 5 years is a long time. In the same way, 5 years ago, we couldn't have predicted we had a global pandemic. God forbid we have that again, but who knows what the next 5 years will bring. And so the opportunity, again, by sharing oversight of all of this work is the opportunity to collaboratively say, this is shifting, or this is shifting, or we have this opportunity with our budget, or this challenge with our budget. And I think it puts the engagement on the outcomes and the success, hopefully, of the strategic plan across all of the board as it should be, which is exciting.
So next step will be once we know the committee assignments, committees will work with staff to do the KPIs. So we'll be able to keep at a high level and do our oversight. It's great. Other comments or concerns generally? I don't know as we need to go through each one, but
we may not have to walk through it at all. I mean, everybody's had it for over a week, right? I mean, I think it's just a matter of if there are questions, and also just to have a common understanding of the approach, right? Knowing that it is our document shared, us as the board, but it is our collective strategic plan, and it will be a living, breathing document, ideally, right? So we will watch it evolve over time, hopefully in a good way.
Flood.
Thanks. Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. I was somewhat surprised. First of all, great job. I like the way you set it up. Strategic Planning Committee. It's, I could figure it out. That's well done. Thank you very much. All the good writers. I was surprised by the few number of Human Resource Labor Relations Committee assignments. And I just wondered if, so that's fine. I'm not looking for extra work for our committee. But I just wondered if maybe we missed something going through this whole process. You know, people as our greatest resource. We don't have that many topics for the Human Resource Labor Relations Committee to have oversight over. So I just thought that as this document evolves, maybe that's something for us just to watch, maybe just something to keep our eye on. Gee, maybe there's some more things that would be people-oriented things that we haven't really nailed down here. But I like the way you did it. I think the assignments that you gave to the HRLR committee make perfectly good sense, and we'll give it our best shot. But that was my only lingering concern, not a big concern, but just a little concern there.
The only thing I would say that is, Pat, we're happy to try to find some more things for you, but I think the things you have are also they're pretty substantive, is what I would say. They are not high in number, but they are exceptionally substantive, right? Particularly as we set these goals and articulate them. And maybe the chancellor's about to say this, but we haven't had a strategic plan in 19 years. And I would say that the challenges facing the workforce are very different now than they were, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I think the strategic planning document sets up the HRLR committee to have those conversations in a way that are linked to the broader health and sustainability of the system. So again, I would say that the number of them may not be very high, but the heft of them may be as you flesh them out. And I think that it's not a reflection of how we feel about you. Is what I would say.
We stand ready to do our fair share, and
I have full faith.
No problem. Thank you.
Could you just continue to, recruit and retain fabulous staff and faculty? That's a small goal, but
well, I just want to join the conversation with you. I think that when we fill that position, I think there's going to be a lot of work to do, and not simply because of driven by the plan itself, but the happenstance that we've arrived in with high rates of turnover for a longer period of time. And so, and I will point out that personnel is one of the 8 things that Carolyn spends half her time on. So we look forward to getting more of her time back.
Yes, we do. I was actually also going to just chime in very quickly, Trustee Flood, that so one of the things that when Jeff and Trustee Kane and I were kind of going around the table, there were several that it was difficult to sort of assign them to just one because they have a rippling impact on several of them, and HRLR was one of them. So it may be that some of the items that we put through to FFT really because it's something that they would be tracking, but they will become part of what we're reporting out and talking to HRLR. And so it was difficult sometimes, and we'd go back and forth, like, what's the primary? But I think you'll find that often what we're going to talk about will have a little bit of an impact on all of our committees. So we're just going to try to incorporate that in our updates, but we wanted one that was kind of the primary.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Our overriding goal is to just make sure this is not a document that sits on a shelf. I don't think we worry about that given how it's been embraced by everybody, but that's our job. And so we'll make sure it is front and center in all our work. Anybody, I don't want to go through each of them unless somebody feels a compelling need to do so, but any other general concerns, assignments that you don't agree with?
I will also say, as you go through it, if you get into it and you're like, this does not belong with us, it actually belongs in Pat's committee, you should just feel free to say that. I use Pat as an example because of the prior conversation, but I think the that remains true. I mean, I think there's going to be things that surprise us and unexpected things that we can't anticipate just based on the letters on the page. And so the good news is by this kind of conversation and through the work of the whole board, we'll be able to adapt as that goes forward. Or maybe FFT takes something up and says, who really needs to see this? ASA or HRLR, right? And we can go from there.
And even though committees may not have assignments, I mean, I think of audit committee. The audit committee is fundamental to making sure our sustainability and finances are on the up and up. So everybody's engaged, whether directly or not. Anything else?
And Roger had a comment that I thought we should follow up on, which is to put in writing the overall coordination of gathering information and making regular reports to the board by the strategic planning committee. So that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And the charge to the committees and being clear, it's an oversight charge, and that the KPIs are the first step. Okay. Anybody have any?
One more.
Yep, Roger.
Thanks. This is, excuse me. Hold on 1 second. I am on. Okay. A little bit off topic. I don't think so. Looking at the last, I think it's the last page of this document, or sorry, it isn't the last page. Sorry, just a moment. It's on page 12. Goal 3.5.
Yep.
It talks about the full board. The Board of Trustees, Chancellor, and Presidents will ensure regular review of system, university, law school missions and their internal alignment. I just wanted to raise that again because it is still not clear to me today how we're going to get from point A, which is where we are, to point B, where we have a clear defined mission for each of the universities that allows for maximum cooperation and minimum inefficient competition.
Right.
Yeah, I would say that a couple of things. That section of it is actually lifted out of the NECHI report. Jeff, I'm looking at you here because you're on page 12, 3.5, which is
Right.
under action 3 related to the commitment about unified accreditation.
Right.
And so part of that comes there, but we really put that as the full board because it goes to that, like, things that are in everybody's work, right? There is how we sort of put that. But I agree, and I think the strategic planning committee, we understand the strategic planning committee is tasked with that initial work on the mission statements, as we talked about at the meeting in Presque Isle, that will then come back to the full board.
And
Yeah,
I think there's an urgency to that, so that
Absolutely.
it frames all that we do. Sorry, Roger.
No, I was just going to say that's fine.
I can make it more explicit in the document if that's helpful.
Well, it's not so much in the document. I just want all of us to have a collective understanding
Yeah.
about getting to that point where we've got these defined mission statements we're all comfortable with sometime in the next, several months, as opposed to someday.
Yeah. I sort of like branding, but mission statement's fine too. But just so we know.
Understood totally.
Yeah, thanks. And again, I wasn't suggesting that anything had been done or should have been done before now. I just want to keep it front and center.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Thanks.
Top priority because it's hard to do our work otherwise. Other concerns, questions from anyone? Board members, presidents, chancellor, staff? Okay, this doesn't require a vote, right, Emily? And so we can just basically, this is a work plan. Each committee take it from here. We will do a summary document from this conversation, sort of a fleshed out minutes so that we all are on the same page and make sure we stay there. And I really appreciate this very much. And I
would just say, like, if there are things that come up that seem out of sync as we move forward, to just raise them, right? So we can make adjustments, which I know we'll be able to do.
Yep. And do 5-year plan. It will require some tweaking. 5 years is a long time. Okay, with that, let me ask for a motion as we conclude our public meeting for the executive committee to go into executive session under the provision of 1 MRSA section 405(6)A to discuss the evaluation of personnel and the consideration of appointments, evaluations, employments, and duties, and 1 MRSA Section 4056E to consult with its attorney concerning legal rights and duties of the university. Could I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by trustee Eames, seconded by trustee Alexander. I guess, do we need to call the roll, Kayla? Take the vote?
Yep. Trustee Riley,
Yes?
trustee Eames.
Yeah.
Trustee Kane,
Yes.
trustee Flood,
Yes,
trustee McMahon,
Yes.
trustee Cates,
Yes.
trustee Mishu,
Yes.
motion carries.
Great. Do we need to go into a separate room?
I will get you there now.
Okay, here we go.